I'm going to commentate over the editing of at least a few pictures today of this McLaren 570S that I shot for Forgeline wheels. They're going to use the photos for a feature, a set feature or something on their website. Let's check Forgeline out real fast. They make some pretty good wheels. But anyways, here's an example of a feature. So I think this is what they meant. Now, I talked to the guy who asked me to shoot this McLaren for them, and he didn't ask for anything specific. He looked at my portfolio, and that was basically it. Now, he contacted the owner of the 570S who was ordering the wheels, and the Forgeline media guy asked him if he had a photographer who could shoot the car when he got wheels put on. And so the owner of the car, who'd I've already shot this McLaren before, just with all different wheels, put me in touch with the guy. So they didn't find me out of the blue. This was kind of set up thanks to the car owner. It's always good to build relationships with car owners because they'll put in good word for you with companies that they order parts from. So anyways, this is probably what I expect to see eventually. Up here is my images with a short bio on his car, highlighting the wheels specifically. So I'm not going to be as up close as these images. He did not ask for a shot list. He said whatever I get is going to be fine. And now it's completely different than in the past. I've shot for Mecum Auto Auctions, and they give you an extremely strict shot by shot list of things to shoot, focal lengths that you can't go past or under, lighting situations, specific detail shots. It's a pretty long list. So I haven't really shot anything for a company in a while, so it was refreshing to hear that he just was like, you know, go do what you want to do, and send us the photos. So anyways, enough about Forgeline. So first things first, always just import. This is my workflow. I just import everything into Lightroom and I start from there. Alright, so I am going to choose a few here to edit once Photoshop opens. I don't want to shoot, or I don't want to edit just easy stuff. I want to show you some of the difficult stuff. Now this kind of sucks because the road was very uneven, so I'll see what I can do to fix that or to make it less noticeable. So this one highlights the wheel pretty well. And I like this one quite a bit. Alright, so I'm going to start with the first one. I usually leave white ballast alone, exposure alone, up the contrast by 7-ish. Drop the highlights by 12-ish. Pump the shadows by 12. Pump the whites by 12. Lower the blacks by about 7. This isn't something like the numbers don't really matter. It's more just to, so this is obviously a raw image, and when a camera takes a raw image, it doesn't change anything about it. But if you were to say shoot in JPEG, it's going to mess with some of this. So I just give it super subtle changes, enhancements, I guess you'd say. All personal preference here. Okay, and then I just take that and add it to all of the images. Oops. So I've got all the images from this composure. It's always, I almost always do 5 bracketed shots per CPL turn, and I do 2 CPL turns 99% of the time. So I've got these 5, but there's a lot of sun glare, as you can see. So what I do is then I shoot the same CPL turn, but use my hand to block out the sun. So that's those 5, and now I turn the CPL to pick up the reflections. So here's the difference. It's obvious. Picking up all the reflections on the side of the car. And then I do the same thing, but block out the reflections, or sorry, block out the sun glare. I don't know why. Oh, I accidentally added that to quick collection. It's pretty low. I don't know if I can lower it anymore. This is also the first shoot I'm doing with the 5D Mark IV that I bought. I had been shooting with a Canon 6D forever, and it's towards the end of its life. So I finally upgraded. So I'm going to open all these. I'm going to highlight all of the ones that I want for this composure. That's these 20 images. I'm going to right click on it, and then I'm going to open as layers in Photoshop. It's kind of a meme in some of the automotive photography Facebook groups, but people really hate light poles and electrical lines in their in some photos. I've never understood it. So yeah, the 5D Mark IV feels very similar to the 6D. I noticed right off the bat there's a bit of a bump in image clarity, and I could see that while really zooming in here. It would be a lot blurrier if I was using the 6D. Now I really noticed it when looking even closer at closer up images. I mean, this is just a lot crisper. Than it would have been with the 6D. But most of the buttons are in the same place, but there are a few things you have to get used to that are different. I might go mirrorless one day, but Canon's good mirrorless is $3,500, and I'm not really ready to drop that. So first things first, always path out the car. Always create a new path and call it car, and find a decent exposure that kind of separates the car from the background a little bit, which is really tough because we shot in front of this cornfield. So there's a lot of these like little reflections, but just gotta make do. And again, for those watching the YouTube recording, I'll be responding to questions. This is a recorded live stream, so there are some people asking questions in the chat. So if I just randomly go off on a tangent about something, somebody probably asked about it and I'm just answering the question. Drawing a path on a car with a spoiler is always a lot more time consuming. Doesn't matter too much. You don't have to be pixel perfect here. At least with my style, because most of what I do is relatively subtle. But it is good to be as accurate as possible. So usually with supercars, the bottom of the car is very straight and perfect. And if you watched the previous edit I did of an S2000, the bottom is not perfect at all. So you kind of make it jaggedy by doing this along the way, you know, so that it's not perfect because the car is not perfect. But with these supercars, it's pretty dang perfect down there. Pen tool is extremely important to get used to when you're photoshopping instead of using Lightroom. It's just the only way to do it. I've tried doing shoots without using the pen tool, and the edits never turn out right. It's time consuming though. I mean, it kind of sucks sometimes, but alright, path is done. And I think I did it. I did. It's backwards. I accidentally chose the wrong version, but it's alright. You just make the selection with a 0.5. So right click it. I always add a 0.5 pixel feather radius. Something I learned from Pepper Yandel's classes. So we're not ready for that yet. So what I do is I create 2 folders after creating the path. So car and background and foreground technically, but whoops. And then I put everything that doesn't have my hand in it in the background folder, and everything with my hand in it in the car folder. I apply the mask to the car folder. And now we get to decide the look and the feel, basically. I mean, the first image of the set, you want to keep it consistent throughout. So I think my biggest critique of my work is everything's a little bit too bright sometimes, and I always want to mix it up and be like, man, I want to really edit something a little darker, a little grungier. But then I always look at, say, you know, this exposure, and I'm like, I like the way, you know, that it looks better than the darker image. So I think I'm gonna go with the brighter one. So again, this is 2 CPL turns. I like the darker sky on this side. Oops. I'm gonna turn this to lighten mode, and I'm gonna get rid of the sky because I want that darker sky with more definition. But I want, you can't see me point at the screen, I want this part of the asphalt because it's brighter, just gives it more definition. Super subtle, but you just got to pay attention to that. Alright, for now I'll leave the background alone. And let's deal with the car. So this one's going to be a harder edit just because of how bright it was while we were still out shooting. Usually I don't start until about an hour before the sun sets, but this time we were out there almost 2 hours early. So it kind of depends on how bright I want the car to be compared to the background. One thing I always pay attention to is, so you see how bright the brightest highlights are on the car? I never want those brighter than the brightest part of the sky. That's always a pet peeve of mine, is when I see people edit and the car is, 20-30% brighter than the brightest part of the sky, and it just doesn't look real. Now there are instances where that looks good and the style and stuff is, it plays into that a little bit, but I try and stay away from that as much as possible. So I am probably going to use the two bright ones here. Let's see the difference. It's way too dark. That just doesn't pop as much, but I might use part of that. Right, so this is kind of where your artistic style and the look and feel you want for your images. So I'm going to use a darker exposure to kind of get rid of some of these super bright highlights. Kind of loses definition if you leave super bright highlights in there. This wrap is going to be pretty difficult in the sun to make super consistent, just because the shadows are so much different color wise than the highlights. So again, that's just to take away some of that super bright, too bright highlight. Again, all personal preference here. All right. So misaligned a little bit. Should always use a remote when you shoot, so that you're touching the camera as little as you can, as little as possible. I did not use a remote on this shoot. All right, so I want some of this reflection in the window here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new path and call it window passenger window, or I guess that would be driver side, wouldn't it? And I'm going to, not sure what. There we go. So I'm gonna draw a path. I always start at a corner. Is that a scoop? I don't remember. Let's go find out. Nope, just a reflection, something. Okay, so if we make the selection, I just want to get rid of a little, actually probably all of the window of that layer. Just because I like the highlight on the top like that. Depending on the background and stuff, sometimes I like the highlight to be on the bottom, and I know that doesn't make as much sense. It's not as realistic, but sometimes it just looks better. So depending on how hard the body lines are, sometimes what I will do is, like, you see the real dark parts of this image, or depending on how busy the background is, I will go in and I will path out, and I will actually like get rid of reflections that I don't want. Now I don't know if it would really look that good on this because the background is very clean. I'll fix this and I'll fix this. But honestly, I chose this location because it has a very clean horizon. It's up by the airport here in Kansas City, and airports are almost always built somewhere that's pretty wide open. So again, I'm not gonna use this, I don't think. I just want to see if it looks any better. It's really tough to, when you're doing this, to make the edge of where the reflection starts and ends to be realistic. You can come back in with a bigger brush and you can kind of feather it out like that, and that looks okay. I've seen people come in and draw their highlights, and I've actually done that before too. With a car like this, you don't need to, but like if I were to look at Jimmy Zhang's photography, he draws a lot of his highlights in, I think. I wish he would do one of these where he would show how he did it. So so like this. Whoops. Anyways, you can see that he's done what I was doing just there. He's probably actually drawn some of these highlights in too. But with a car like a Camaro like this, it has a very hard body line right here on the top, and you can make something very sharp and it still looks realistic. That's not the only one I've seen him do that on. Here's another, the Challenger. Very, very hard body line right here. So you can easily get away with using a brighter exposure on the top and just masking out along that very hard body line, which I think is probably what he did here. Anyways, it just gives extra definition. Jimmy's really, really good, and I always look at his stuff for inspiration. Anyways, I guess I'll try this just to keep going down this rabbit hole here. I will path out. This reflection, the dark part of the reflection. Again, just kind of just showing you options. I'm probably not keeping this. So you can make it a little bit more realistic without feathering it in manually with a brush. And what you can do is you can select that mask again, and you can come up here to select, modify. You can contract it by however many you want to feather it by, so maybe like 5. You want to use the inverse of this. Control Shift I, and then come back in here and do a feather of 5. Oops. But only on the parts that connect to highlights. You leave the other parts alone. Because realistically, light fades into dark, dark doesn't fade into dark. So, I don't know. I think it's okay either way. You can also make it less subtle. So like, add a brush, whoops, and set the opacity to 50%. And draw it back in. Again, it would be important if I was shooting and then over here, over against a car. So this angle of a car, and then over here on this side of the road, you've got buildings or like road signs, stuff like that. Then you'd probably want to get rid of some of these reflections. But since they're very smooth and clean, I just leave them as is. So I'll come back in and fix this. I don't want that, whatever that is. It might be the car owner standing over here, or actually it'd be over here is where he's standing. Might be me bent over, crouching next to the camera. I can't tell. All right, so what else? I want this highlight that defines how much depth there is. I like that highlight. Gotta decide how many highlights you want to keep, how many reflections / highlights you want to keep, and how many you want to get rid of. I saw recently a girl was asking in one of the photography education groups that I'm in, she wanted to learn how to use Photoshop, and I noticed that she said to get rid of all the reflections, and that's not, I think that's something a lot of people want starting off, and then you kind of slowly learn that it's not about getting rid of reflections, it's about controlling reflections, and keeping the right ones and getting rid of the right ones. So if it's distracting and it doesn't highlight a body line or something like that, yeah, work on getting rid of that. Like this here, I want to darken the underside. So I'm not going to completely get rid of this, but I'm going to brush out 50% and see what that looks like. There are other ways to accomplish this, like blending modes and such. But I like a lot of control. I actually also want, so 100% I'm brushing out to bring in this carbon fiber texture. This is why multiple CPL turns is so important, because some of these, like here, that CPL turn has this texture but not this texture, so you got to brush out what you don't want and what you do. So it still might be a little much, so I'm going to do another 50%. So I'm not sure if I love having that reflection there. Let's see what it looks like without. Maybe a little cleaner, but I kind of like having it there. Kind of defines the edge of the front there. So I want to brush some of it out, maybe only 50%. If I were doing this for, say, McLaren themselves, I would be masking literally everything out. That way I could come back individually. But this is not for McLaren, so I'm not too worried about it. Now, some people might not like this reflection. Obviously, it's the sun bouncing off of the rearview mirror here, the side mirror. I'm not sure that I hate it. Back here, I'm gonna brush out some of this. Yeah, I kind of like how bright that reflection is. I'll probably leave it. I want to keep the reflection defining this underside because it is black. So getting rid of that just kind of gets lost. All right. So I don't want so much rotor showing. So usually I'll brush out that part of the CPL turn. Cool rotors, but I want it focused on the caliper and the wheels themselves. All right, do a little organization here. Make sure I don't want any of these other exposures for anything. All these brackets are way too dark. All right. So here's the before and after. That's a bad example. Here's before, brushing in and out things we don't want. Here's after. It's subtle, but it's better. You bring in the definition of this front lip. You bring in more definition of the top edge of the car and separate it more from the background, in my opinion. Some people would leave it a lot brighter, but I would not. You bring in definition here, under the window. You lessen these reflections of the other side of the road. And you bring in some of the definition in the window, in the mirror. I actually kind of like having a little more contrast in the mirror. So I'm going to brush some of that back in. Oops. Little things. All right, so next step. Now that you're done, sometimes it's better to take a second look at what background you want. So again, I was talking about how I might want to use these darker exposures. So let's take a look. Since I'm done with what the car looks like. Still like the brighter one. So now we will work on color grading. So I start with selective color on the background. So it's fall here, obviously. Complementary color of purple is yellow, right? So maybe like a yellowish orange vibe. I'm not sure. Usually kind of helps to have an idea of what you want to do beforehand. You don't want the background to pop too much because it'll take away from the main subject, obviously being the car. Color grading is 110% personal preference unless you're grading the car, and then you have to make sure that it's realistic. A lot of guys would just leave it like this and they'd be happy with that, but it's very fake. But people are, especially because it's fall and the leaves are changing and stuff, people are like, let's just make all the yellows super red. You gotta be careful because we don't live on Mars. Not too much green. I'm actually gonna darken the green quite like all the way. Try and make it yellow and blend in, because you see over here, I've got sun glare. There's probably nothing cyan. Okay, up here is. Make it a little darker. And make it a little bluer. Blues again. Top left. I like a subtle turquoise in my skies. Purple, there's not going to be much in this image, or should I say magenta. So I'll leave it alone. I don't touch whites yet. I crush the blacks a little bit for the contrast. And I think I want to add some yellow. Just a little bit. You can really change the look and the feel of an image by coloring the blacks differently. I think it's, in daytime stuff, it's like the #1 thing you can do to change an image. So you want to leave whites alone for the most part. Sometimes I'll drop them a little bit. Drop the blacks in the whites, if that makes any sense. If you're using selective color layering, you just come in here and you play around until you kind of understand what it's doing. So adding some yellow, taking out some contrast or some black, making it brighter, is usually what you do in these images. You don't want that, it just looks too fake. You obviously don't want to add red. So usually a sunset style like this, you add just a tiny bit of yellow and you remove some of the black to make it a little brighter. And then you can mess with the neutrals, but this will kind of really screw with the image quite a bit. Usually I think it's a better way to add some contrast by adding some black in, but if you mess with the colors at all, it looks pretty bad, unless you want to go with for like an infrared look, a fake infrared look. Usually leave the neutrals alone other than for black. All right, so color wise, that's good. I'm gonna clean some of these imperfections up. Some people would go pretty crazy here and get rid of everything. So like this crack running all the way through, and this crack or whatever that is, and these cracks, but less is more in my opinion. You just leave things mostly natural. But I do think this needs to go. It's always tougher on the edges. This tool doesn't love to work on the edge. I'm gonna darken that a little bit, so I might get rid of that. I'm not sure. Some people would go in and get rid of the hole in the lines. I'm gonna leave them for now. Just see what it looks like at the end. I'll usually add a curves here. Sometimes it looks good to raise the blackest of the black pixels. Gives it more of a matte look, kind of that hipster vibe that a lot of people go for. You can obviously overdo it. I'm gonna leave it alone for now. Easiest way I find to add your own custom vignette is just come in here, add a brightness contrast layer, and brush in what you want vignetted, if that's even a word. I'm usually not a huge fan of changing the sky too much. It sucks that I shot earlier in the day than usual because I'm not a huge fan of super white blown out skies like this. This is probably a candidate for a sky swap, and I might do that. I did not look at skies to replace with, and I don't subscribe to any of those services that you can get a lot of free skies from, so I don't know. Probably not, to be honest. Alright, so let's color grade the car. Oops. Color. Not going to be too many reds. Where did I add it? Selective color. There we go. So yeah, I don't see a single red pixel. Sure they're there, but a little bit on the caliper. Again, I'm just looking at the caliper when I do this, the yellow caliper on the red there. So the yellow, again, caliper, some of the highlights here, 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 a little on the front. So I want these to be darker because everywhere where yellow shows up is on the bottom of a reflection. And I want those to be more subtle. Probably nothing green. Nothing that I see. So cyan, mostly reflections from the sky. So those you want to be careful with. You don't want to make it look fake. Oh, okay. Tons of blue, obviously. Could drastically change the color of a car here. If you wanted him to, if you want the car owner to see what it looks like pink, you can send him a photo like this. That's actually a really cool color on this car. He's getting ready to rewrap or paint it, so maybe I'll send him this image and be like, hey, new color idea. Anyways, back to keeping things realistic. Add some contrast in the blues. Make the blues a tad more purple because in person it's more purple than blue. But you don't want to overdo it and make it look fake. So there it's a little bit more purple than blue. So there's going to be a lot of magentas here. Again, I'm going to darken it by adding blacks. So the whites on the car, again, you can way overdo it here. If you look on the windshield or the back of the car, you can add way too much white. And it's too contrasty and doesn't look right. You can add some yellow because highlights on a sunset are, again, kind of yellow sometimes, but the other two colors you want to leave alone usually. So you can really mess with it by messing with the neutrals here. But I want to go to the blacks. Don't want to lighten the blacks on the car because then it just looks washed out. But you don't want to go more than like 1 or 2. You don't want to add more than 1 or 2% to the blacks. Color wise, depending on the background, sometimes I'll mess with this. Again, easiest way to change the look and the feel of an image is adding color to the blacks. So we like, it's more washed out, bluish there, and it's subtle, but now everything is a little more purple, which is what the color of the car actually is. I'm going to add a curves adjustment. Biggest thing you can do besides selective coloring on an image is dodging and burning, and there are a ton of tutorials out there on how to do that. I have an action set up to create a 50% gray layer, set it to overlay at 50% opacity, and then you can come in and brush in and out things that you want brighter or darker. So you want the flow low so that it's all gradual and more subtle. Again, do as I say, not as I do. You want to mask this stuff out. You can really control it. It's probably too much. So let's do 30% instead of 50%. I will usually go over these hard highlights like this and really dodge those. It just brings definition. And I'll definitely do that for the wheels as well. So I'll do this at like 70%. That's at 100% to bring out more tire definition. Do the same on the back here. Add definition to the tires. Pretty crazy wheel setup. Looks really good. I want to make the caliper less obvious, so I'm going to dodge it a bit. One thing I'm noticing while looking at this is this wheel, very neutral color, silver, you know, chromish. This one's got a lot of reflection from whatever's on the other side of the road, which was just cornfields again. So I'm going to add a hue saturation layer. I don't know why it's taking so long to preview. And I will mask this in only on the wheel. So you don't want to completely, I mean, you could easily come back in here and, you know, say master and get rid of all of it. And it actually looks okay, but usually you want to keep some color in there. One thing I did early on when I was editing photos, especially for black cars, I would add a saturation layer and get rid of almost all color. And it was flashier and it looked cooler, but it didn't look realistic. I think I am going to edit that out. So now I'll clean things up. I will see how this looks. It's always tough to get that to work properly. You want to be careful here. Thanks, Nick. So you can clean this up as much as personal preference. There's some imperfections in the wrap. On other images, it would be a lot more obvious. The closer you are, obviously, to the car, the more those will show up. I don't like to go too crazy and fix everything. You want to keep the patterns in the carbon fiber accurate, which is really hard to do sometimes. See, that just does not look right. Usually try and keep the parking sensors because they're actually a part of the car. And if you get rid of them, it might look funky. I don't know what that is. This is a lot easier than usual just because the background was so clean already. Not a super huge fan of this comp, but so I like to add some fake haze to separate the car from the background. Kind of needs it here a little bit. One thing I like to do when you have like a sun flare that's very prominent, I'll go in and find, I used to have these and I don't know where I put them all when I changed computers, but I had realistic looking ones. You know, I bet I have them saved. Here's one I have. So you set this to screen mode. One thing I don't like about these is that the edges are hard. What I'll do is I'll basically accentuate the sun flares wherever they are. But you don't want to go overboard. Make them small. You put them where they actually are on the car and it just looks better. So there's one up here. I don't know if that'll really look good though. I'll try it though. It's fine, it's soft. It softens it up a little bit. Nobody will ever notice it though. This one's a bit too bright. Alright. Dodge and burn the background. You don't want to go crazy. You get a lot of color banding if you do the sky like that. You're just giving it definition, that's it. What I used to do is make fake sun flare color. I usually don't do this because it usually doesn't look right anymore to me. You kind of grow out of things. Soft lights usually I think it's okay. It adds some color in this part of the image. Another thing I've been known to do is to find images of airplane exhaust fume trails, whatever you'd call them, sky trails. I used to have some of these saved on my computer, and I do not anymore because I got a new computer. I don't know if this will work. I don't think it adds anything to this image, but if I shoot around an airport, and it's obvious it's an airport, so I had a GTR shoot one time. Let me see if I can pull it up just to give an example. Let's see here. Shot the GTR, what, like four years ago? But anyways, it was next to an old airport that's not really used anymore in the area. And I made it pretty obvious. Oops. So like here, that it was an airport. I just added one in basically every image. Almost every image. That one was actually real. Okay, I will be right back. Image doesn't really pop out at me. I think I'm on the verge of making a pretty big change to my style and my look and the feel of each image, but I haven't had test shoots to take that risk. I don't want to take that risk on a shoot for a wheel company, you know. So anyways, for now I'm going to be done with this image. Basically I just delete all the images I didn't use to save on file size space. You can always add them back in later if you wanted, so you're not really missing anything. I'm going to take a little bit of this contrast out. Just adding some definition. There are imperfections in this wrap, like I said. So like here, I remember the wrap is kind of busted up. You have to be you have to be careful, excuse me, with this color, because I mean, you change any bright to dark and automatically it changes from purple to blue. This is a tough wrap. I think I will take this out. If it's easy. And I don't think it will be. So let's mask it. Sorry, let's draw a pass. Okay. Alright, I am going to save this. Do one more image. And we'll call it. One thing I want to show though, so this is something I learned from Pepper. You can add a gradient mask. Set its opacity's relatively low. You set its blending mode to overlay. And you have a bunch, which I do. If you're unsure about the look and the feel of an image, you can kind of click through here color wise, what goes well with what. Does anything look better than what I'm doing? It's kind of cheating, but it is something you can do if you're lost and you don't know where to start. Have I ever done selective coloring? You mean like where the car has color and the background is black and white? I did when I started out photography. I think it is one of the cringiest, ugliest, worst things about new photographers' styles. I think it's an absolutely awful idea. But I'll show you what it'll look like. There you go. Selectively colored. We can make it really emo and gothish there. Not a fan. Alright, let's do one more. I want to do one where the reflection, highlight, stuff like that is more on the top and less on the side. I don't know if I got, since I'm focusing on the wheels in the shoot, I shot very low to the ground. So most of the highlights will be lower on the car. Actually, let's mix it up. Let's do one of these. There we go. Reflection is going to be on the top and less on the bottom. And this will show you that controlling reflections is more important than getting rid of reflections. So I will edit this one. So I'll take the same adjustments I did to the first set of images, and I will add them to all of these. So I wish I had gotten to this stretch of road earlier. You see over here, right as I am shooting. So I had him turn the car around, and as he's turning the car around, the sun dips below the horizon. And I wasn't able to get those super hard shadows that I like. But we'll see if it's worth it. This is super hard shadows that I want. But it kind of makes the car look fat. I'll definitely edit this eventually, but well, kind of speed edit this, I think. Because I'm not really sure if this is going to be a final image. I'm not sure if it's going to be delivered. But we'll see. This is less about the wheels, more about the environment and the interaction between the car and the environment. I know what you're thinking. If you're watching this on YouTube or something, you're like, this sucks. I don't want to mask everything. And you're right, it does suck to have to mask everything. But I promise you, it looks better. You can't outsource it. I'm sure there are people on Fiverr that'll do this for cheap. I don't know if you can trust them. Looks like I exclude. I think excludes the right one. Every now and then I accidentally change that and then I forget the correct setting. So just pay attention to that. When you draw your major outline and then you go back in and you mask out these little things, it's supposed to subtract what's inside from the overall mask. And I believe that's exclude overlapping shapes, but I don't remember. So I'm just gonna do it the ghetto way. And do it by hand and manually, and it's not gonna look as good, but okay. So this is what I'm talking about. I'll go in here and I will mask out. No, I won't. I'm just gonna draw a new path. Okay. So I think that's a winner. What I will do is I want less sun flare. I don't want this. I don't want this haze that you get from the sun being directly on the lens. So what I'll do is I'll take this. Let's see how this looks. Can't use this part because my hand's there. So I'm gonna add an adjustment layer. Make it more orange. Alright, that's better. So now we can work on the car. So I want the headlights from this, and that's it. The owner of the car didn't know how to keep the headlights on when the car was off, so unfortunately in most of the images the headlights are not on, and I like to have the headlights on. How much what per picture? I don't have a per photo rate, and I almost will never edit somebody else's photo for real, if that makes sense. I'll edit photos of somebody else's to help them, or to just mess around and be funny. But I'll pretty much never take somebody's image and make it good. Whoops. I don't know. I know there are photographers and editors out there that collaborate, where one shoots and the other edits almost every set, and I think that's really cool. But I don't think I could ever do that. I like having too much control. I want the wheels, tires from that one. This is what I'm talking about when I say controlling reflections and not getting rid of them. You still want some of that definition. Unless it's a matte wrap. Again, this is a wheel sheet, so you gotta make the wheels pop. I want some of this detail. So I will mask that in. Looks awful, but it's alright. We're gonna add an adjustment layer. Mess with the curves. Fortunately, I just think it's too hazy. So again, just taking some of this color out of the black wheels, just because I think it looks better that way. I think it's too much though. Okay, let's color grade this. What's funny is there's not as much green as you would think. Should be no blue, really. I mean, I am literally like 2 minutes from having the perfect hard shadow here. Live and learn. Watch burn it. Way too much. Gotta be careful when you fake a shadow, because it could look really bad. I'm gonna tone it down a little bit. Right. It's okay. Be better if it was a few minutes earlier. Is it so large? It's because I didn't get rid of it. Do it. One negative of upgrading cameras, you get much bigger file sizes, so everything takes longer to save. So the base image. So here's what we did. We went from this to this. Looks very Need for Speed-ish. If I were a wheel company, I would be happy with that. This is less about the wheels, more about the car. I feel like this could pop more with some clarity. Alright, I am going to end the YouTube video for now. Thanks for watching. I'll do a few more of these, probably tomorrow or the day after that. I don't know. It'll end up on YouTube in the next week or so. You can always reach out to me with questions about parts you didn't understand. I'm always happy to help people who are learning Photoshop for car related things, because that was a struggle for me. So alrighty, thanks for watching.